Thank you for joining the December 2024 VMware TAM customer webinar. This webinar is organised by the VMware TAM organisation to provide our customers the opportunity to interact with great speakers about content that will help them get the full benefit from their VMware software. Before we get into today's session, there are just a couple of basic announcements. Our next TAM customer webinar will be on January 9th, where we will be discussing Data Services Manager, a component of VCF designed to allow DBAs and data managers to provision databases and data services on your VCF platform. Your interaction during this webinar is important, so please make use of the Q&A feature of Zoom to ask your questions, and Shree, our speaker, will be answering these towards the end of the session. If we're unable to answer your question during the webinar, please reach out to your TAM and ask them to follow up. At the end of today's session, you will be prompted to fill out a simple 2-question survey related to the value you receive from this session and any topic suggestions for any future webinars. Your completion of the survey is a very valuable gift back to us, and we'd greatly appreciate if you took the time to answer this. And lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and your TAM can make the recording link available to you. After a few months, the recording will be publicly available on the VMware TAM Services YouTube channel, which you can access from the QR code on the page. And so that brings us to today's speaker and topic. We're joined today by Shree, Technology Product Manager, to present on our newer offering, VCF Edge. So over to you, Shree.
Thank you, Amy. Hey, welcome everyone. So I'm part of VCF division, and I manage both VCF Edge and their broader set of other products. But most importantly, we'll talk about VCF Edge and technically how you'll design it and architect it on your environment. That's what we'll dive into. And I'll go through all the technical question in the end. So I have pretty much kept up a lot of time for the end to go through each and every aspect of if you have any specific designs or anything you wanted to ask, we can go over that. So what is VCF Edge, right? So we have a VCF portfolio, which is VCF Edge is exactly similar, all the components and everything when you acquire VCF Edge. So this picture is just giving a holistic view of how you build your data center and edge, right? So VCF Edge is basically nothing but similar experience what you have in a VCF, but it will also give you a flexibility for the customers to consume and design on your own, right? So what does that mean, right? So if you need 1 node, 2 node, 3 node, 4 node, or many combination of your edge design. So that means if you have a VCF edge on your location or on your premises, you basically are saying that I have a full flexibility of choice to design an edge. That means you can put that in your data center edge or your regional hub, or you can build any other use cases you meant for, right? So that's what the major highlights over here. There's so many value props. I'll not go through that right now, but I'll just dive into all the technical aspects of the design point of view. So what kind of use cases and everything you must have thought of, you can keep that right now. We can go through that later. But let me talk about all the technical aspects of when you're deployment or implementation of your architecture, what are possible, what is not possible, right? So on VCF Edge option, there's two things, right? One is if you have a VCF Edge, you can deploy the VCF Edge with a SDDC Manager, which is you have been doing in a data center, right? Similarly, you can do with a 3-node cluster, 2-node cluster, or 4-node cluster. So what does that mean, right? If you do with SDDC Manager, the minimum requirement is 3-node if you are doing with vSAN, right? And you can go up to 24 VI workload domain, and the LCM lifecycle management is centrally possible, and NSX is required. And there is another thing you also need to make sure that you should have when you're deploying SDDC Manager based VCF Edge, you require 100 millisecond latency with 10 MB bandwidth, right? We also say that if you have a 2-node cluster, if you want to design without vSAN, so that means you also need NFS or any other external storage capability to support that edge design. You can support up to max host in a cluster, both without vSAN or with vSAN, and NSX is 100% required. And then 100% 100 millisecond latency and 10 MB bandwidth is across the board how you want to design it. And then the last one with 4-node consolidated. So you must have heard about in VCF, you have a standard architecture and consolidated architecture, right? So in an edge situation, there are a lot of use cases like when customer wanted to deploy a consolidated edge or in a 4-node deployment. That means a customer may have a manufacturing unit or a production unit or a shipping vessel or something, right? So in that case, you may need a consolidated architecture where you are self-managing that site specific to that, or management and workload, everything in consolidated way, and that specific to your design. Then in that case, you need a vSAN that also support maximum up to 64 clusters, and each site is a VCF instance, right? So let's say you have multiple units, and each manufacturing unit maybe you're managing separately, and that will be your VCF instance for each unit. And there is no requirement for no central site because each SDDC manager will manage that particular site, right? So this is available with on the SDDC manager based deployment if you want to do that, right? But like I said, right, this is one of the umbrella or one of the way you deploy your design, right? But let's look at it like if you take that first slide, what I talked about it, this is what it looks like a standard VCF Edge deployment today. But we'll also go through decouple certain other things to make sure that how you will design differently, not only this architecture. So this is one of the example, like, okay, you have a management domain on the left-hand side, that may be on central data center. And the right-hand side, you have a workload domain and specific to each edge location, right? And each workload domain will have a container or VM, whatever you want to run. And on the left-hand side, you will have either a MPLS, SD-WAN, or any other connectivity, right? As long as it maintains 100 millisecond latency and 10 MB bandwidth, it should be fine, right? And in this example, like on the left-hand side, your management domain, your vCenter, there's two vCenter. One vCenter is dedicated for your central data center or management components. Another vCenter is dedicated for each workload domain. So think about you have multiple edge sites, and that each edge location vCenter is centrally located, right? You only hosting your workload and specific to your edge, that's on your workload domain 1 and 2, or multiple clusters you can do. That's a traditional way of deploying things, right? But as we said, right, like you have a full control to design a customized or a flexible choice of VCF Edge. So now let's talk about if you have a customer and you really wanted to have a central monitoring and consolidated VCF Edge with SDDC Manager instance, right? So in this example, you have an area operation on your data center, which is basically connecting or managing your data center as well as edge. Now, in this example, on the left-hand side, your SDDC Manager is deployed to vCenter. One vCenter is your basically controlling your management data center, and another one is managing your workload domain, right? So each two vCenter is right now we are showing one vCenter is dedicated to workload domain 1, another is dedicated to workload domain 2. That may be your regional data center, right? You may have a different locations specific to maybe, let's say you are in Europe or America or Asia Pac. You may have a dedicated data center for each area. And that dedicated data center may be serving to few edge sites. You can have that regional data center may also contain some of the workloads. You can have that. On the right-hand side now, as I mentioned, you may have a few production units or a manufacturing or factory automation or whatever you want to do. Those sites also needs a dedicated management instances, as well as you also want to manage as a, let's say, air-gapped environment, or you have a limited network requirements. In that case, you may wanted to dedicate a SDDC manager and a vCenter for each edge locations. In that case, you'll deploy a VCF instance, and each VCF instance will manage that edge locations. But the area operation on top, which is basically managing and giving you a view of entire fleet of both data center, regional DC, edge sites across the board. Right? You can and certain times a customer needs that unified monitoring That way they can both monitor data center as well as edge, right? Similarly, if I take another approach, like I mentioned before, now a VCF Edge also give you flexibility of your deployment. Now think about, okay, I don't want to on the right hand side with the green box, right? It says that, okay, now I have changed a little bit differently, right? So now I want to just deploy 2 node clusters with vSAN, and I really don't want to put any SDDC manager there. It's just a smaller sites, maybe retail or some other, right? So what I did there, I decoupled the vCenter, and that vCenter is located on a central data center. You may put in a central data center or close to your regional hub, or any central location means it may be a data center, it may be a colo, it may be a cloud, it may be some edge hub or something like that, right? So I have taken that vCenter and put that in a centrally located, and that managing multiple sites. But if you see that a witness appliance, there is a witness dedicated for each location. So one witness appliance can go up to 16 sites or 32 sites. There is a sizing example I can go through in the end. So right now that witness is managing multiple sites. So basically you are hooking up your edge sites so that witness and vCenter managing together multiple sites, right? This is a kind of a segregated VCF Edge instance without SDDC Manager each site. Similarly, now let's go through another example. You have a central data center now, maybe the central data center in San Francisco, and then you have a regional data center or edge hub on maybe another city near to some other location. In that example, you may have SD-WAN connectivity between both the sites or multiple sites. And now what we did here is, like, we have decoupled vCenter witness from central data center. We have moved that to a nearby location where your edge sites are, right? You wanted to have a data processing and everything faster. You may need a better manageability, and you want to separate out your data center and edge hub differently. So you can basically decouple those things from your central data center and dedicate those vCenter and witness to manage those edge sites in differently. In this example, SDDC Manager is on a central data center, area ops in central data center, which is monitoring across the board, and Edge vCenter, which is on a regional data center near to the edge location, and witness also on regional data center. So this is one of the example you can do. Let's talk about another example, right? Now, as you mentioned, if your customer has a far edge, thick edge, near edge, there are multiple edge, right? So in this example, let's talk about near edge and far edge. So a customer wanted to have a dedicated edge, near edge, which is kind of a multiple edge locations, which has required more data processing, more compute power and everything. And they wanted to keep that to closer to your data center, or they wanted to keep that near to your regional data center, right? In that case, you may have a SDDC manager and multiple vCenter managing those locations. But now, as VCF Edge also says that there's a minimum requirement, right? Minimum 25 sites, is requirement to go with. But SDDC Manager supports 24 workload domains, right? So in this example, what we said that, okay, you can go up to 24 workload domain for near edge. And once you go to far edge on the right-hand side, you may need 1 node, 2 node, or multiple 3 nodes, whatever you have, right? What we did is we decoupled the vCenter and dedicated a vCenter for edge. And that vCenter is sitting one of the either workload domain, or you can put it somewhere in management data center, right? And then manage other edge sites, which are like far edge locations. It may be a far wide distance from manufacturing. It may be a cell tower. It may be a somewhere on the ocean or wherever it is, right? Any far edge, you can have it, and the vCenter can give you a minimum 150 millisecond latency connectivity. That way you can manage that edge sites from a central location or a regional location. It's up to you. So now like as I mentioned, you have full flexibility to control your design and how you want to design and architect and what combination you can deploy it with VCF, right? So like we talked about a lot of options with SDDC Manager, without SDDC Manager. So with SDDC Manager, on the first slide, I showed you a couple of options, what you can possible, what is not possible. Let's talk about how do you do without SDDC Manager, right? This is purely vSphere Web Client and vCenter with ESXi, right? So you have choice for standalone ESXi. You have a requirement just to deploy one node in any of the location. Give an example, all the telcos and cell towers is one node combination of host, right? Yes, you can do it, but there is some pros and cons, right? Each site will be independent. Bandwidth may not be a constraint for you, right? But there's a management overhead cons, right? Because it's a single point of failure, there's no HA, right? And lifecycle management is locally to the site, right? Somebody needs to go and do the local lifecycle management, right? So all those things you have to make sure when you are going to the design patterns, right? Same thing for vCenter for ESX on each site. So now you are putting a vCenter for each site and multiple ESXi host maybe, right? In this example, your pros will be yes, each site will be independent. Bandwidth may not be a constraint, but you'll have a multiple vCenter to manage, right? And then you have another one, you will have a one vCenter and multiple sites with ESXi host, right? This is mostly customer will use it, right? And in this example, you may need a central vCenter, right? And that is located on your management data center or centrally located somewhere on regional hub, right? And this vCenter is managing full lifecycle management for entire fleet for each locations, right? And you can scale up to 2,500 hosts per vCenter on each site. You have also similar, because as long as you have a vCenter, you can go up to 2,500 per vCenter, right? Bandwidth and latency is not a challenge because it will give you both 150 millisecond latency for local site and multiple sites. But when you go multiple sites, you really need to consider your bandwidth, because where exactly you're putting your edge and how far your vCenter is. We recommend that it should be 150 millisecond or less. So that way you sustain when you're doing the operation like lifecycle management, patching, segregated patches, and adding a cluster, deleting a cluster. Those operations needs to happen through vCenter. So similarly, you have another options, like we talked about this one, but I just want to highlight, like, okay, you also have a two node with vSAN witness, two node with external storage. When you do the two node with external storage, you can do with SDDC Manager or without SDDC Manager. Without SDDC Manager means you should have a vCenter, which you can deploy it, and two node with vSAN and witness. Witness is required for to satisfy the third node, right? And pros on this when you do two node with vSAN is its vCenter can go up to 2,500 hosts. HA is built in, right? No single point of failure. vCenter manage entire fleet as well as your lifecycle management. And vSAN require multiple witness appliances for scale. So if you think about if you're going to 1,000 hosts, you really need multiple instances of witness, right? And bandwidth and latency is similar. We mentioned 150 milliseconds across the board, right? And but if you're doing SDDC Manager based external storage, two node with external storage, that is basically 100 milliseconds, because SDDC Manager requires that 100 millisecond latency, right? So now, if you're buying a VCF Edge today, you're also getting a VDI deployment. In this case, so let me go through our requirement a little bit. So in a VCF Edge, you should have a 25 minimum physical location requirement. But if you do VDI use case with VCF Edge, there is no 25 minimum edge location requirement at all. You can deploy once you are deploying a VDI, we know that it can be go to a central data center. You don't need any cap of edge location. You can go at 2, 3, 4, whatever you have edge location. There's no criteria that you should satisfy for 25 edge locations. When I say 25 edge location, it is physically identification of a location. Give an example. If you have a edge sites, a manufacturing unit, it has multiple units. Let's say 123 California Drive is your main street, right? Main address. But as long as you have a unit 1, unit 2, some numbers to identify they are different locations or different units, that means you satisfy for 25 location for that location, even if in the same city, same area, or whatever, right? Similarly, if you have a server room or a data center, which is located on one location, but you have multiple rooms for edge locations, that also called out an edge location as long as you can specify that unique identification number, right? That's called 25 locations comes into that umbrella, right? If you have a separate route, it's fair, but sometimes customer comes and say that, hey, I have multiple manufacturing units or production units, same address, but different numbers. Yes, that is supported. Okay, now let's come to the VDI, right? So when we call VDI, there is no physical 25 location limit at all. There is no requirement. So if you're deploying a VDI for the edge or any for VCF, that means these are the 3 design patterns mostly customer do. What we are saying is you have to dedicate a vCenter for VDI workloads. That means you cannot deploy if you have a management vCenter, which is managing a management component. You cannot just take the VCF Edge and deploy for VDI. You have to dedicate a VDI workload domain or VDI for vCenter where you can manage those VDI workloads. As long as you satisfy that requirement, then you can deploy in these 3 architecture. One is VDI with VCF standard architecture, which is you have a management domain. You are creating a workload domain dedicating for VDI specifically, and that VDI vCenter, you can see there is a VDI for vCenter here that's dedicated for VDI and that workload. And then if you are using a consolidated architecture with VDI, that means you have to dedicate another vCenter for VDI management as well as your workloads for desktops and apps for your VDI. But if you're using only vCenter, decoupling the vCenter completely from VCF, then you have to dedicate one vCenter management for your management component and VDI management and vCenter for VDI, which is together, but they can be, it's up to you. You wanted to put VDI management on management vCenter, or you wanted to keep it on a vCenter for VDI. It's up to you as long as you separate out 2 vCenter. One is dedicated for VDI, one for your management core component or infrastructure component, that we are okay with that. So that's VDI. And a few other questions, I'll go through that. But think about when people think that, okay, I have a VDI in my data center, but I also wanted to provision a desktop pool in my edge locations. As long as your desktop pools are provisioning in an edge location, you satisfy your compute and everything, we don't care. It's as long as your network and your architecture supports it, you can deploy VDI desktop pools either in your data center or an edge hub or wherever you are hosting, or in an edge location, you wanted to give a couple of desktop pools to nearby retail location or whatever, right? That would be okay. We don't restrict that. And another example, another criteria I just wanted to tell you that is whenever taking a VCF Edge without VDI, so 25 is, I said, one of the requirement as a physical location, but you also had a choice that vCenter and ARIA operation can be decoupled and deployed in a data center, in a colo, or in a cloud, wherever you wanted to deploy it. But the licensing of the VCF Edge, which is going to the vCenter, that should be only hosting the edge nodes. That means if you have 25 edge locations and all your host is deployed in edge locations, you cannot just use that vCenter to give the licensing for your data center purposes or any other locations, right? You have to dedicate that edge location licensing, right? And then few other thing I wanted to highlight is Kubernetes. Let's say you have it's a requirement is 8 core per host, right? 8 core is minimum. You can go up to 256 core. But let's say today you have a 8 core licensing. One server has a 8 core socket, one socket with 8 core licensing, right? And you are fine with that. But tomorrow you're buying a host with 2 core socket, right? And 2 socket means you will have a 16 core licensing, right? We recommend that you can have that in the same cluster, but we recommend that if you can create a separate cluster and manage that differently on a vCenter, that way your DRS and HA function appropriately and manage your workloads appropriately. It doesn't mix and match with 8 core and 16 core. And another thing is when you do the vMotion and DRS and everything, you have to go through balancing yourself versus DRS is managing and doing a vMotion and everything, right? So we recommend that don't mix and match, right? So separate out, create a new cluster, and put those new 16 core and 8 core different clusters. Okay, another example is if you are VCF Edge customer and also a VCF customer, right? You have a VCF and VCF. Okay, well enough. So with VCF full stack, you already deployed area ops, or you already have an area ops in a data center and everything. Now you are acquiring VCF Edge, then that area ops can be extended to edge nodes or hosts and clusters, and you don't need to redeploy or reconfigure anything for your area ops. It's basically you just take that highest entitlement and connect to your VCF Edge nodes and everything. But if you are only VCF Edge customer and now you are using area ops, but you have a data center existing, it's not a VCF, it may be something else, an existing environment, you cannot connect that data center clusters and host. You can only entitled to use edge hosts and clusters. Okay, but your area ops, which is coming through VCF Edge, can be deployed any central location. You can deploy it in data center, core, or cloud. Okay. So this is one of the example I mentioned now. Most importantly, the reason I highlighted this one, most of our customers deployed this way, right? They will have a regional edge sites and multiple edge locations with vSAN and witness, and they may have SD-WAN or any other connectivity around the sites. I just wanted, this can work for both far end and near edge, any combination you can deploy. Now let's talk about the sizing, right? I mentioned if you're using a witness, that's what that slide means, because we're coming to the witness. Witness is important factor of this edge design, right? So if you're sizing for 1,000 sites, let's say I wanted 1,000 sites with 2-node vSAN cluster with witness appliance. You really need one vCenter for management, and we recommend that you dedicate one per edge, right? That's what the our licensing also talks about. So then you really need 16 vSAN witness. This is size 100%, but if you go 80% or so, so maybe you need 15 vSAN witness appliances to support 1,000 sites. So that means you have to carefully size it your environment, that wherever you are hosting your that vSAN witness appliances, it needs to be sized appropriately, because you need a compute and storage requirement, right? And you can segregate that witness appliances. Let's say, give an example, you have multiple edge sites. You can have a round robin method. Each witness appliance is managing maybe 2 sites or 3 sites, and you can dedicate one of the edge appliances in each location, right? So site 1 is managing site 2, maybe site 2 is managing site 4, or round robin method, right? You can combine that just to optimize your compute resources and everything. Similarly, if you go to 2,000 sites, you need 32 vSAN witness appliances, and if you go to 5,000 sites, you really need 80 vSAN witness appliances, right? And the vCenter count also goes up in each location, right? If you have 2,000 sites, you still in 2 vCenter category. But if you go to 5,000, you really need 4 vCenters, 1 for management and 3 for edge locations. And each edge location vCenters can be segregated, right? And they can manage up to 5,000 sites, right? So I think we have a design guide, goes through all the design scenarios and everything. What I covered today, those are documented on this white paper. This is publicly available and it can be accessible. Maybe, I mean, you can share that. So I'll pause here and take the questions now. Thank you.
Thanks, Shree. We do have a few questions in Q&A. So the first one that we had was around the site requirements. So just a question around why is it a minimum of 25? Was there any particular reason for that?
Yeah, the 25 requirement is nothing technical related. It's all a business justification, right? That's what Broadcom wants to sell, right? And this is what we want to do the business this way. So that's what 25 came in. There's no like technical justification that you should have a 25. No, this is just a business justification. That's what the SKU and licensing terms has been defined from the executive, right? That's what it is. 25 sites is a minimum requirement to satisfy edge, anything VCF edge. Otherwise, it will be data center.
Cool, thank you. The next one we have, are there any scale limitations? How many edge sites can we have on one edge VCF vCenter?
That's a good question. So each vCenter can go up to 2,500 hosts. So that means if you are doing 2 node or 3 node or 4 node, depending on your configuration, you have to stay in that limit. So that means I gave you the sizing of, let's say 1,000 sites. You need 2 vCenters, right? And 16 vSAN witness. And if you're going 2,000, which is approximately you are hitting vCenter limit, right? 2,500. Then you still need 2 vCenter to do that. But these are all 2 node. But if you're going 3 node clusters or 4 node, then you know the sizing and numbers. That's why you will calculate it.
Cool, thank you. And we've got the next question. Are the designs that you presented only valid for VCF Edge, or can they also be valid for normal VCF in Edge sites? Sorry, for normal VCF in Edge sites.
Yeah, if you have a VCF customer and you can still deploy exactly same design for your edge. There's nothing, if you compare VCF and VCFS, the components are same. Only VCFS has a additional component vSAN witness, right? So, but you can design exactly same what I mentioned today, both VCF and VCF Edge.
Great, thank you. Next was what's behind the 150 millisecond latency with vCenter and remote sites, specifically asking about a 2-node vSAN site without witness, sorry.
Yeah, the requirement is 150 millisecond. The reason being is when a ESX and a vCenter, they talk to each other, there are certain things they share, right? HA, heartbeats, patches and everything, right? So we recommend that 150 millisecond is required. The reason being is if you are pushing some hot fixes or patches or any updates or upgrade, the vCenter and ESX needs to communicate on that latency parameter. That way it will better operate. If you go beyond that, you may have a certain issues, challenges. Maybe it fell, upgrade will fail, or you are adding a cluster or deleting a cluster, your operation will fail. That is the reason we recommend that it should be 150 millisecond if you're using a vCenter.
Thank you. Those were all the open questions. I am just going to leave it open for another minute and just see if we have any further questions, just because we do have enough time to cover those. So if anyone in the audience does have any additional questions, please feel free to post them in the Q&A now. We've had one question come in, Shree. So around the limit of the 25, don't know if that's the sites with normal VCF.
Yeah, so the question is VCF normalized 25 max workload domain. Yeah, so VCF today we have 25 workload domain maximum. One is management domain, 24 workload domain. So that's called 25 total, right? So you have to dedicate one. First time when you bring up the VCF, it's a one workload domain. The constructor will create your management component, SDDC Manager, NSX, vCenter, area ops, all goes to management domain. But you have 24 workload domains for your workloads. That limit is today around the SDDC Manager. In future, it may be removed, right? Because you are coming out 9.0 and everything, those numbers will change, right? But so far, as for customer deployment, right? We have not seen that anybody goes to beyond 24, because if you think about this way, right? Each workload domain is dedicating a vCenter. That means you can scale your clusters and your deployment for each workload domains, right? But as I said, 24 is not going to restrict you, because if you reach even 24 workload domains, then you can decouple a vCenter and dedicate multiple vCenter to manage that. Only thing is you're losing is centralized LCM, lifecycle management, right? And this will be changing in 9.0 onwards, right? We are changing a lot of things, right? But so far, if you look at the carefully, 24 workload domain doesn't going to restrict anybody today, anybody deployed VCF or VCF Edge, right? They can still use that 24 workload domain. One workload domain, you have a vCenter, but you can create multiple clusters, and each cluster can go to each location, right? So that vCenter is centrally managing, but your clusters are each location, and that location can be 1 node, 2 node, or 3 node, depending on the supported parameter, right? If you're using SDDC Manager, the vCenter, then you may not have a 1 node or 2 node with vSAN, but you can have a 2 node with external storage. But you are decoupling the vCenter, then you can have everything.
Great, thank you. And I think there's just a follow-up to that. So how can we deploy a minimum of 25 edges if we deploy the maximum 24 workload domain using the normal VCF license?
So what you can do is you can deploy a one workload domain, right? And that one workload domain will give you a vCenter, and then you can create 25 clusters. Each cluster can be different locations. Make sense?
Great, thank you. All right, that's all the open questions. Again, I'll just give it one more minute, see if any further questions come in. Okay, I think we're probably done with the questions in that case then. So thank you very much, Shree. That was a really useful presentation covering VCF Edge design. And thank you for the white paper link as well. So for those of you who are in the audience, you can ask your TAM to pass that link on to you. So as we mentioned at the beginning, this presentation has been recorded and your TAM can make that available to you. Please join us in the new year in January when we'll be looking at Data Services Manager. We look forward to seeing you for that on January 9th. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.